I never expected that moving to a quiet mountain retreat would pit me against a self-appointed tyrant in an HOA. My name is Lucas Chapman, though some might recognize me from the show Wilderness Redeemer, a survival TV program where I travel to remote areas and demonstrate how to live off the land. After filming grueling expeditions around the globe, I yearned for a peaceful place to call home, somewhere I could rest and enjoy nature without the cameras and spotlights. I thought the Pines at Stormhawk Ridge would be perfect. Perched high in the Rockies, the Pines was a small, tight-knit community of about 30 families. The single road, Stormhawk Pass, wound along cliff edges and through dense forest before finally curving into our peaceful enclave. A battered wooden sign at the entrance read, "Welcome to the Pines," and beyond it lay a cluster of log cabins and sturdy chalets. On my first day, neighbors waved in greeting or stopped for a quick chat as I carried boxes into my newly purchased cabin. With panoramic windows, a stone fireplace, and a wraparound porch, it was everything I'd hoped for. I breathed in the crisp mountain air, relieved to be away from hectic production schedules and wrangling with sponsors. Little did I know, trouble was brewing in this otherwise idyllic haven. Among the HOA members was a woman in her early 50s, with meticulously styled hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Miranda Anetti, though most ironically called her Karen. She had a reputation for meddling in everyone's business, from fussing over the color of porch railings to berating kids for riding bikes too fast. Before I'd fully unpacked, a neighbor quietly warned me, "Watch out for Karen. She thinks she owns the place." At the time, I chuckled. I'd dealt with real dangers in my career. Jaguars, steep ravines, monsoon downpours. A pushy neighbor didn't sound too intimidating. But I was about to learn that Karen could be more destructive than any wild animal in the jungle. Not a week passed before Karen appeared at my door, brandishing a thick binder labeled HOA Guidelines. Her smile was thin-lipped, her tone condescending. "Hello there, Mr. Chapman," she said, emphasizing each syllable with annoyance. "Welcome to the Pines. I trust you've read our regulations." I forced a friendly smile, albeit perplexed. I skimmed them, yes. In truth, my real estate agent had said the HOA was fairly low-key about trivial matters. But apparently, Karen had a different approach. She tapped the binder. "We expect compliance. For instance, your truck was parked slightly over the designated boundary. That might violate guidelines about preserving the scenic look." She arched a brow. "We also prefer neutral shades for exteriors. I hope you're not planning any flashy modifications. We must keep property values stable." I assured her I had no radical renovations in mind. My cabin was perfect as is. She nodded, though her demeanor suggested dissatisfaction. Over the next few days, I caught her prowling around the neighborhood, scolding people about minor alleged violations. A fence an inch too high, a birdhouse that didn't meet HOA color palettes, or a dog that barked before 7 a.m. Soon, I heard swirling rumors about Karen's newest pet peeve, the only access road, Stormhawk Pass. She claimed that, historically, part of it cut through her parcel of land. She was pressuring the HOA board to take action to limit traffic and impose new restrictions, anything from gating it at night to charging a toll for outsiders. Of course, none of this had official backing. The county recognized Stormhawk Pass as a public access route, essential for the entire community. Yet Karen insisted it belonged to her. She seethed whenever a big delivery truck rolled through, complaining about potholes, dust, or excessive wear. It seemed petty, but in a remote mountain area, the pass was literally our lifeline for groceries, medical emergencies, or simply going to work. If Karen had her way, we'd be at her mercy. Everyone recognized how absurd that was, and they mostly ignored her. I, too, assumed she would eventually drop the matter. I had no idea how far she was willing to go to make her claim a reality. One evening, I was on my porch enjoying the distant glow of sunset over the pine forest, sipping warm tea. The hush of the mountains wrapped me in comfort, until Karen's shrill voice cut through. She stood at the edge of my driveway, engaged in a heated phone call. Even from a distance, I caught snippets. Yes, private property, they keep ignoring me followed by a few words about blocking the pass. My brows furrowed. Was she serious? The next morning, a neighbor, an older woman named Bernice, told me that Karen had threatened to personally shut down the road unless the HOA gave her authority over it. Bernice rolled her eyes, chalking it up to idle talk. She can't do that. The county would never allow it. Yet a nagging feeling gnawed at me. My years of survival training taught me that folks who fixate on controlling something are capable of reckless actions. Something about Karen's determination worried me more than I cared to admit. But aside from wariness, there was little to do. The road was so obviously necessary, I believed she'd never get away with meddling. Still, the mood in the community shifted. Each time we drove along Stormhawk Pass, especially the narrow section hugging the cliff, unease lurked. Karen had a house perched near the middle stretch, where the road turned sharply. If she decided to park something in the way, we'd be stuck, forced to remain or find an impractical route over the rugged terrain. During an HOA meeting, she ranted about heavy vehicles damaging her land and demanded compensation. The other board members politely but firmly reminded her that Stormhawk Pass was recognized as a public easement for all residents. One man even said, "Karen, you can't rewrite decades of legal documents." She left in a huff, threatening to take matters into her own hands. Everyone shook their heads, amused or exasperated. I, however, saw a dangerous glint in her eyes. I'd seen that same glint in people who refused to accept nature's laws, often leading them into dire straits. That weekend, I volunteered to guide a small group of local teens on an overnight wilderness excursion in a safe part of the mountain. We hiked, set up basic shelters, and practiced campfire cooking. The kids loved hearing about my TV show experiences, from forging rivers in Alaska to outsmarting tropical storms in the Amazon. I taught them simple survival tips: how to find potable water, how to read topographical clues, and how to remain calm under stress. After a night of stargazing and swapping ghost stories, we hiked back on Sunday morning, expecting to return by midday. But as we approached Stormhawk Pass, we noticed something was off. The usually smooth route was lined with chunks of rock and dirt, as if someone had intentionally loosened boulders. A portion of the road had partially collapsed near the cliff, creating a gaping hole. Dust hung in the air. A father who accompanied us blanched. Did there just happen to be a rock slide? Another adult pointed out fresh tool marks on the boulders. It looked more like sabotage than a natural event. Then we saw battered metal rods and rebar protruding from the hillside, as if someone had physically pried them from a retaining wall. Panic flared among the teens. "How do we get home now?" one asked, voice trembling. The father tried to phone his wife, but service was spotty in these mountains. My own phone struggled to find signal. I asked the group to remain calm. We needed to assess the damage. Carefully, I approached the dislodged portion. Sure enough, the road surface had been torn up, possibly with a crowbar or heavy equipment. Rocks were scattered to block any vehicle from passing. The gaping section by the cliff was the worst. Without major repairs, it was impassable. Essentially, Stormhawk Pass was ruined. My blood ran cold. The only explanation that made sense was sabotage, and I didn't need the cunning mind of a detective to guess who might be behind it. Karen's hysterical demands about private property had culminated in an outrageous act. She'd effectively severed the entire community's link to the outside world, unless we found a way around or performed an emergency fix. The father turned to me with fear. "Lucas, you're the survival expert. Any ideas?" I took a deep breath, scanning the terrain. "We'll figure this out. First, let's confirm everyone's safe back in the community. Then we'll see if an alternate route is viable or if we can do a makeshift repair." Inside, though, I was furious. Karen's power play had crossed a line from nuisance to life-threatening sabotage. Our group carefully skirted the damaged area on foot, inching along the rock face. The once stable gravel underfoot crumbled occasionally, sending pebbles tumbling into the ravine below. More than once, I had to calm a shaking teen who feared slipping. We arrived at the portion of the road that was still intact, eventually reaching the cluster of homes in the pines. Relief washed over us when we saw neighbors milling about, but their anxious expressions showed the day's chaos was no secret. Indeed, the sabotage had occurred earlier that morning, leaving a number of vehicles stuck on the outside portion of the pass, while others were stranded inside. Some folks who'd gone to the city for weekend errands discovered the blocked road on their return, now forced to camp out in their cars or risk climbing around the debris on foot. Meanwhile, inside the pines, we had families with elderly relatives, small kids, and pets. If an emergency struck, paramedics couldn't get through, nor could we easily evacuate. The HOA board members convened an emergency meeting by the community's lodge. People were livid, demanding answers. Among the shouting, I gleaned that Karen was nowhere to be found. Her house was locked, curtains drawn. Some claimed they'd seen her messing with the retaining walls at dawn, but no one had direct proof. A few pointed out we needed immediate repairs. Someone asked if we had heavy machinery. Another worried about the cost or the legality of moving boulders on her land, if indeed it belonged to her. I stood and raised my voice for calm. My survival instincts told me that, in a crisis, step one was to quell panic. Folks, I said, we can't wait on arguments. We need to restore safe passage. That means clearing debris and shoring up the collapsed section. I've done some basic road and bridge repairs on my expeditions, so I'll help lead the effort. But we'll need manpower, tools, possibly new materials. A father of 3 nodded. I can gather volunteers. We do have a small tractor that belongs to Dale. Could that help? Another man chimed in. We have a generator and some power tools in the shed at the lodge. Maybe that's enough to start clearing. I nodded. Let's try. Meanwhile, we also need to figure out how to contact the county for professional assistance. The cell signal is spotty, but I might attempt to climb a ridge to get a better line of sight. I paused, scanning the crowd. Has anyone seen Karen? Silence. Then Ms. Bernice spat, hiding, I bet. She's always yapping about how that road is hers. Now we're trapped. Anger seethed, but I urged them not to form a mob. Right now, the priority was rescue and repair. Legal repercussions could come later. With that, I led a small group to gather equipment. My life's motto from survival show days rang in my head. Adapt, improvise, overcome. We do just that, no matter how monstrous Karen's sabotage. We got to work immediately. I took about 10 volunteers, strong men and women of various ages, up the pass. With the tractor, we began clearing loose boulders. My survival experience taught me how to watch for further rock slides, how to anchor a rope to a stable tree, and safely move large debris using leverage. Some people lined up with shovels, others hammered in stakes to hold tarps that could catch smaller rocks dislodged from above. It was slow, grueling labor. Dust caked our throats, and the midday sun beat down on us. The narrow ledge near the cliff was the biggest hazard. One misstep or unexpected shift, and we'd tumble hundreds of feet. We inched forward, using boards as makeshift reinforcements. Yet progress stalled when we discovered the retaining wall support rods had been ripped out. We'd need new rods or a robust workaround. Meanwhile, word spread that half a dozen families were stuck on the other side, needing to get back to the pines. With no safe route, they had to remain in a motel or bunk with relatives in the city. Tensions soared as day turned to evening. A few neighbors confronted me. Lucas, we need your survival knowledge. Can we carve a footpath up and around the ridge? Something folks could walk at least. I considered the terrain, recalling that the southwestern slope might have a game trail. With some rope and clearing, we might open a path. Yes, it's possible, I said. We'll need multiple volunteers, but it might let people cross until the road is fixed. It's steep, though, so we'll have to secure lines along the way. As the group rummaged for rope and climbing gear, I took a moment to gather my thoughts. My phone battery was dwindling, but I attempted a satellite text with my advanced GPS device, one perk from my survival show kit. Usually, it let me send coordinates or short messages from remote areas. If it worked, I could alert the county about our emergency or even contact my show's production team. Maybe they'd scramble a helicopter or something. Throughout it all, Karen was conspicuously absent. Some said they saw her slip into a neighbor's yard earlier, but she swiftly disappeared. If she was truly behind this sabotage, did she realize how dangerously she'd crippled the entire community? Or was that her goal all along? A piece of me suspected she wanted to force the HOA's hand, to make them beg her to open the road. But we were dealing with more than inconvenience. Lives could be lost if medical help was needed. Night fell, and we erected floodlights powered by the lodge's generator to keep working. I stationed a small crew to keep watch for any sign of Karen or further sabotage. The second crew set off to scout a possible footpath around the ridge. I joined them, carrying rope, pitons, and carabiners for my survival stash. 2 or 3 hours of bushwhacking later, we discovered a deer trail that curved around the cliff face, though it was overgrown with brambles and scattered with loose rocks. We methodically cleared brush, hammered pitons in a stable rock, and strung rope handrails. My survival training from episodes set in mountainous regions guided me in how to anchor lines so a novice hiker could hold them while crossing. By midnight, we'd created a rudimentary path wide enough for single-file foot traffic. Not ideal, but better than no route at all. At least some neighbors could cross the mountain on foot for supplies or to reach their loved ones. Exhausted, we returned to the pines around 2 a.m. The road repair group had made limited progress. Some debris was cleared, but a large section remained impassable. People huddled near the lodge, sipping coffee, anxious about the next day. We devised shifts. A few volunteers would attempt to catch a few hours of sleep, then relieve the current workers at dawn. As I trudged back to my cabin, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was Ms. Bernice, looking worried. "Lucas," she said softly, "we found footprints that might be Karen's near where the rods were removed. She's definitely behind it, right? I can't believe she'd do something so insane." I rubbed my eyes, fatigue pressing down on me. "Seems likely. We need real proof. But for now, let's focus on fixing the road. Once that's done, the authorities can investigate. Maybe the county sheriff can come up if we get them notified." Bernice's hands trembled. "You'll fix it, right? We have a neighbor who's diabetic, another with a heart condition. If they need an ambulance, we're stuck." A tear glistened in her eye. "We used to think Karen was just pushy, but this is monstrous." I placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll do our best, Bernice. No matter how tough the terrain, we'll find a way. I've dealt with worse in the wild, and we have a whole community of good people. We won't let her sabotage ruin us." Yet as I climbed into bed, that vow weighed heavily. I'd never confronted sabotage by a neighbor so bent on asserting her will. The stakes were huge. This was no stage drama for TV. Real lives depended on swift resolution. My mind churned for hours before exhaustion finally claimed me. Morning arrived with a haze of fatigue and a renewed sense of urgency. I joined a group at the base of the sabotage site, checking the structural damage in daylight. The scale of destruction was worse than I'd initially realized. Metal rods bent, entire chunks of asphalt pried away, rubble strewn across a quarter-mile of road. It would take days or weeks to fully restore the pass to vehicle traffic without professional equipment. Some neighbors proposed renting bulldozers or excavators from the city, but that was impossible unless we got them up here. The pass, ironically, was too damaged to allow such heavy machinery through. A few folks joked bitterly that we'd need a helicopter to airlift a bulldozer. Meanwhile, I used my satellite text device to send short messages to the county's emergency management office, explaining we were cut off and needed immediate assistance. So far, no response had come through. Around midday, a young woman named Danielle approached me, breathless. "Karen's outside her house," she said. "She's telling people that the road closure is official and that we can only pass if we pay her some kind of toll or sign an agreement acknowledging her ownership. She's lost it." I clenched my fists. This was beyond arrogance. It was extortion. "Let's go see," I muttered. Gathering a few level-headed neighbors, I marched down the lane toward Karen's property. She stood near a large wooden gate she'd apparently erected overnight, blocking what little passable portion remained. A homemade sign read, "Private Road. Trespassers will be prosecuted." My blood boiled. "Karen," I said, voice clipped but controlled, "you've effectively trapped us on this mountain. People can't get supplies or medical help. This is illegal." She raised her chin defiantly. "It's my land, Mr. Chapman. Don't think I don't know who you are. some TV star who thinks he's a hero. But you can't override property rights. I've told the HOA for months that Stormhawk Pass partially crosses my lot. Now, they'll finally realize I'm serious. A few neighbors erupted in anger, calling her a criminal, demanding she open the gate. She smirked. I'll open it once we have an official agreement that each resident pays a monthly fee for using my property, plus the board issues me a formal apology and recognizes my authority to regulate traffic. She gestured at the debris-laden pass. Of course, it'll take some time to fix the damage from recent rock slides, but that's not my problem. Maybe if you all show some respect, I'll consider letting a repair crew in. My hand shook at her audacity. She'd intentionally caused a rock slide scenario to force us to bow to her demands. This was sabotage with a ransom element. Karen, you realize you're endangering everyone, I said. People could die if an ambulance can't get through. She shrugged, her eyes cold. That's on the HOA for ignoring my rightful claim. Then she pivoted, strolling back into her house, leaving us speechless in her wake. The rest of that afternoon, tension soared. Some residents wanted to storm her property, tear down the gate, and forcibly clear the road. Others worried that such vigilantism would only worsen matters. Meanwhile, families with health issues grew increasingly anxious. The footpath we'd carve around the ridge was a help for those physically able to make the trek, but it was no solution for the elderly or for delivering bulky supplies. The biggest blow came when we discovered that Karen had padlocked the new gate in the portion of the pass that was still intact, making it impossible for any large vehicle to approach the damage zone from inside the pines. She'd effectively double-sealed our fate, sabotage on one side, lock gate on the other. We were pinned, determined not to let her madness triumph. I took stock of my resources, my satellite texting device, survival gear, and the robust knowledge gained from filming extreme rescue scenarios. My show's premise often involved me bridging collapsed ravines or blazing new trails in the wilderness. If cameras were rolling, I'd be demonstrating how to rig a pulley system or build a temporary crossing. Perhaps I could adapt those tactics here. First, though, we needed outside help. If the county didn't respond soon, we might need to spark a bigger media reaction, something to bring immediate attention. That's when an idea struck me. My producers often gave me a special emergency beacon for crises abroad. If I used it now, it would alert the show's executive team that I was in trouble. They might scramble a helicopter or at least dispatch a crew to investigate. Typically, it was for life-threatening expedition mishaps, but this certainly qualified as a dangerous scenario. That evening, with the swirling frustrations of neighbors around me, I discreetly activated the beacon. It sent a short coded message indicating that I needed urgent assistance at my location. Then I waited. If all went well, my show's staff or a partner organization might swoop in. In the meantime, we pressed on with the manual repairs to the road and kept rotating teams to maintain the footpath. At dawn, I rallied volunteers. Let's do everything we can from our side. We'll keep clearing debris. If Karen tries to stop us, we'll film it. We can use any footage as evidence of her crimes. Ms. Bernice brought out an old camcorder, a few other folks had smartphones, and we decided to document our efforts and any harassment from Karen. Inside, though, I prayed we'd see outside help soon. Once the world learned how one woman had isolated an entire community on a mountaintop, outraged authorities might step in. Sure enough, around midday, I spotted a faint speck in the sky. It grew into a helicopter, swooping low over the pine trees. My heart leaped with relief. My emergency beacon had worked. The chopper circled once, then found a clearing near the lodge to land. Out hopped two men I recognized. Martin, a field producer from my show, and an experienced pilot we sometimes use for aerial filming. Their faces were tense as they approached. "Lucas, what in the world?" Martin asked, scanning the battered road, the anxious neighbors, and the newly installed gate. "We got your distress signal. Are you okay?" I quickly explained the situation. An entire community stranded, a madwoman sabotaging the only road, and no official rescue in sight. Martin cursed under his breath. "This is insane. Does a local sheriff know?" "Spotty communication," I replied, leading them to the crowd of neighbors. We tried contacting the county, but we're not sure if they got the full message. We need them to come with heavy equipment or at least take legal action to remove that gate." Martin nodded, raising his camera phone to record. "Let's get coverage of this. Once the network sees what's happening, they might push for an official response or at least broadcast it. We can't just leave you all stuck." Within the hour, the helicopter pilot made a quick trip to the city, carrying a short letter from me detailing the crisis. He promised to deliver it to the sheriff's office and the county commissioner. Meanwhile, Martin began filming interviews with frantic residents. Ms. Bernice tearfully explained how her husband needed medication. Others showed the sabotage site, pointing out the twisted rods. Martin captured it all, occasionally shaking his head in disbelief. In a stroke of irony, Karen emerged from her house. She marched over, outraged that a helicopter had landed in her community. Martin's camera whirled around to capture her rant. "You people can't just fly in and out without my permission," she screeched, hair askew in the mountain breeze. Martin calmly asked, "Ma'am, is it true you destroyed this road and locked that gate?" She bristled, hissing that it was her property and that trespassers have no rights. Her statements, recorded in crisp HD, were damning. She looked every bit the unhinged villain, ranting about how she'd been ignored by the HOA. Martin, a professional in generating compelling footage, needed no further push. He filmed her meltdown thoroughly. Karen stormed off, but the damage was done. We had raw evidence of her self-admitted sabotage. Martin planned to broadcast it or at least share it with authorities. Already, my phone pinged with a message from the pilot. The county sheriff was mobilizing a rescue operation, set to arrive by that afternoon or early evening. A wave of relief spread among the residents. Finally, official help was on the way. Karen's reign of terror had hours left at most. True to the pilot's text, a convoy of law enforcement and emergency management officials arrived by helicopter around dusk. They brought a small search and rescue team, a county engineer, and even a news reporter from a local station. The mountain clearing near the lodge buzzed with unfamiliar voices and radio chatter. Sheriff Duncan, a tall man with a firm handshake, gathered the community around. "Folks, we received your letter and the video evidence. This is a serious matter, criminal sabotage, endangering the public. We're here to assess the damage and secure the area. Once we confirm the road is blocked, we'll approach the suspect." Neighbors exhaled collectively, relief and anger mixing on their faces. The county engineer, Ms. Reed, walked with a small team to the sabotage zone, grimacing at the destruction. Meanwhile, the sheriff's deputies prepared to speak with Karen. She refused to open her door at first, but the deputies had the legal authority to demand she speak. Ultimately, she stepped out, her posture rigid, a forced smile crossing her lips as she tried to appear innocent. I observed from a short distance, Martin's camera rolling. We couldn't hear every word, but we saw Karen gesticulating wildly, pointing at the ground, possibly claiming it was her land. The sheriff's expression remained stoic as he replied. Then Ms. Reed arrived, shaking her head. She whispered something to the sheriff, presumably confirming that the sabotage was man-made and extremely dangerous. At that point, Karen's face paled. She realized the jig was up. She tried some final gambit, perhaps complaining of trespassers or demanding the sheriff uphold her property rights. But the evidence was too great. The sheriff calmly but firmly placed her under arrest for felony vandalism, reckless endangerment, and possibly extortion. A gasp rippled through the assembled neighbors as Karen was handcuffed, sputtering protests. Martin's camera captured it all. "Chief, you can't do this," she shrieked. "I was protecting my road from them." They. Her words melted into panicked babble. The sheriff recited her Miranda rights, guiding her toward a waiting helicopter. In a matter of minutes, she was airborne, whisked away to face the consequences of her reckless sabotage. For the first time in days, the pines at Stormhawk Ridge felt lighter, like a storm cloud had lifted. Yet the crisis wasn't fully over. The road remained dangerously damaged, and we still had family stranded. The county officials assured us that, with Karen in custody, they could expedite repairs. Ms. Reed and her team promised to coordinate heavy machinery deliveries by helicopter if needed, or at least plan a day when a specialized crew could come from the city. The biggest relief, though, was that the community was no longer under Karen's tyrannical threat. With Karen removed from the scene, focus shifted to repairing Stormhawk Pass and reuniting families. Over the next few days, rescue crews brought in limited equipment via helicopter. They installed temporary steel beams and laid thick wooden planks to span the worst gap near the cliff. While not sturdy enough for heavy vehicles, it let standard cars and light trucks cross if driven carefully. The moment the pass reopened to essential travel, albeit under caution signs, neighbors cheered. Families separated on the outside returned, tearful reunions abounding. The footpath around the ridge was still in use, but the partial road fix eased the biggest concerns about medical emergencies or running out of supplies. I assisted the county engineer, Ms. Reed, in coordinating volunteer teams. We improvised solutions I'd learned from my show, including rigging a pulley to lift boulders out of precarious spots. Martin captured some of it on film, enthralled by the real-life drama that resembled my TV episodes. The difference was that these were my neighbors, not just an audience. The stakes felt more personal. Local media arrived, broadcasting the story of a rogue HOA member who destroyed a mountain road to assert ownership. The footage of Karen's meltdown, courtesy of Martin, went viral. The public's reaction was swift and merciless, condemning her reckless disregard for an entire community's safety. Some media outlets even recognized me from Wilderness Redeemer, dubbing the fiasco Survival Star versus HOA Karen. It became a national curiosity piece, shining a spotlight on the bizarre extremes of HOA disputes. Meanwhile, up in the city, Karen languished in jail, likely awaiting arraignment. Rumors said her lawyers tried to spin a tale of unintentional landslide, but with so many direct witnesses and her own on-camera rants, a conviction seemed likely. The newscasters interviewed me briefly, praising my role in guiding neighbors to safety and contacting outside help. I deflected credit, emphasizing the communal effort. The real victory, I insisted, belonged to the brave folks who refused to bow to her tyranny. Little by little, normalcy returned. Grocery deliveries resumed, albeit carefully navigating the temporary fix. Some neighbors pinned up a sign near the Sabotaged site reading, "Respect for community is stronger than one person's greed." I found an apartment. The crisis had proven that a united front could triumph over even the most radical attempts at control. By the second week post-sabotage, Stormhawk Pass had an even better fix in place. The county rushed repairs, wanting to quell the negative press. They installed new retaining walls, replaced stolen rods, and repaved the battered section. The resulting thoroughfare was safer than before, ironically upgrading the Pines. Many joked, we should thank Karen for forcing the county to fix the road properly. Of course, no one genuinely thanked her. The entire fiasco had endangered lives, traumatized families, and wreaked havoc. The HOA board met in an emergency session, formally expelling Karen from membership. Her property was seized as evidence in the criminal investigation, and rumors suggested she might lose the house altogether if found guilty of a felony. A wave of relief swept the Pines. The woman who once policed everyone's doormats and holiday lights was gone. Yet the emotional scars lingered. Some residents reported trouble sleeping, worried about what might have happened if no rescue arrived. Others felt betrayed. Someone from their own community had turned rogue. I helped counsel a few families, encouraging them to refocus on the sense of unity that overcame Karen's sabotage. Ms. Bernice, for one, admitted she felt safer after Karen's arrest, but still woke at night, heart pounding, reliving the fear of total isolation. In these uncertain weeks, Martin remained in the Pines, filming concluding interviews and capturing footage of the newly repaired pass. My show's producers toyed with the idea of airing a special real-world rescue, Lucas Chapman at Stormhawk Ridge, detailing how a remote community overcame sabotage. At first, I hesitated, unsure if the neighbors wanted more spotlight. But they told me, share our story, let the world see how a community can stand strong. So I agreed. Meanwhile, small acts of kindness sprang up. People hosted potlucks, repairing emotional rifts. A volunteer group formed to maintain the pass regularly, clearing snow or debris so that no single saboteur could do irreparable harm again. We even installed a new security camera near the crucial bend, courtesy of a donation from a local hardware store. The camera streamed footage to the HOA's website, ensuring transparency. And so, day by day, the pines began to heal. Freed from Karen's meddling and buoyed by renewed connection, the community found a sense of purpose. For me personally, it felt like vindication. I'd chosen these mountains to escape showbiz chaos, yet ironically ended up starring in the biggest drama I'd encountered outside my filming adventures. The difference was that this drama was real, with real consequences and real heroes, my neighbors. A month after the sabotage, I traveled briefly to the city for a scheduled TV appearance. The network wanted me to discuss my next season of Wilderness Redeemer. Of course, they also grilled me about the Stormhawk Ridge incident. My colleagues asked, what was it like facing sabotage by your neighbor? I recounted the highlights, how Karen's mania for control led her to destroy the only road, isolating the entire mountain community. How we improvised footpaths and used my show's emergency beacon to get help. How the sheriff finally arrested her. The hosts expressed astonishment. This sounded like a fictional plot, not real life. Viewers ate it up, enthralled by the notion of an HOA Karen versus survival star. But amid the sensational coverage, I insisted on focusing on the community aspect. It wasn't just me, I told them. Neighbors sprang into action, working round the clock to rebuild. We overcame a dire threat with unity, resourcefulness, and trust. That message resonated with audiences who admired the story of everyday people uniting under adversity. Behind the scenes, the show's executives pitched a spin-off, Rural Rescues with Lucas Chapman, featuring me traveling to small towns in crisis. Though flattered, I was uncertain about committing. My heart longed to remain at the Pines, enjoying the quiet normality we'd fought so hard to reclaim. Back at Stormhawk Ridge, the media interest gradually waned. Karen's legal proceedings continued. Word had it she faced multiple charges: felony vandalism, reckless endangerment, extortion. Her lawyers tried for a plea deal, but the prosecution, bolstered by extensive footage, refused to go easy. If convicted, Karen might serve serious prison time. The hearing date loomed, and some neighbors hoped to attend, determined to see justice done. During this lull, I immersed myself in simpler pleasures: fishing in the mountain lake, tending a small garden by my cabin, and joining neighbors for a weekly barbecue. Sometimes we joked that if any producers needed extreme drama, they should look no further than an HOA dispute. Nature is easier handled than a determined neighbor, I quipped. After all, in nature, hazards follow laws of physics. Karen's sabotage followed only the laws of her twisted mind. Summer edged into autumn, painting the pine-studded slopes with hints of gold and crimson. The road repairs were fully completed, and Stormhawk Pass now boasted guardrails and new signage. The county, embarrassed by the fiasco's publicity, had gone all out to fortify the route. Delivery trucks once again wound up the mountain, bringing groceries, mail, and normalcy. One crisp morning, a neighbor pointed out a news article. Karen had accepted a plea deal, pleading guilty to at least one felony count in exchange for a reduced sentence. She would spend years on probation after a stint in prison, pay heavy restitution, and be barred from returning to the Pines. The community's reaction was a mix of relief and lingering anger. Some thought she got off too lightly, but at least she wouldn't roam free to sabotage us again. The aftermath offered a sobering lesson: the fragility of modern living. One road, intentionally blocked, could reduce an entire settlement to near isolation. The incident also showcased the potency of collective will. Faced with adversity, the Pines forged deeper bonds. Neighbors who once barely exchanged nods now ate dinners together or assisted with yard work. Ms. Bernice described it as a baptism by fire, except the fire was a lunatic with a crowbar. Amid this healing, I found satisfaction in my decision to move here. Yes, we'd faced a crisis, but the sense of triumph overshadowed the pain. My time in the wilderness taught me that adversity can either break a group or bind it closer. This community had chosen the latter path. We'd grown more vigilant, but also more compassionate. As for the media spotlight, it slowly faded, replaced by the next big sensational story. I resumed episodes of Wilderness Redeemer, occasionally referencing the Stormhawk ordeal to illustrate how survival skills can apply to everyday life. The fans seemed enthralled by the idea that my biggest recent challenge wasn't braving the Sahara or Arctic cold, but dealing with a destructive HOA Karen. They found it relatable. Danger can appear in any form, even in your own backyard. One sunny weekend, the HOA organized a renewal festival, celebrating the final completion of the road repairs and the community's resilience. Tables were set up near the lodge with homemade treats, local crafts, and even a small stage for live music. Families meandered about, enjoying the crisp mountain air, kids chasing each other across the newly paved portion of Stormhawk Pass. The irony wasn't lost on us. The road Karen tried to claim for herself was now the site of a communal party. Ms. Bernice, beaming, introduced me to her grandkids, who had come to see the famous survival star. I felt a bit bashful as they asked for photos. Another neighbor, the father who'd accompanied me on that teen overnight trip, expressed heartfelt thanks for my leadership. "You taught us how to keep calm and solve problems as a team," he said. "Without you, we might have panicked or done something reckless." In truth, it was their determination, not just my guidance, that saved us. But I appreciated the sentiment. The sense of camaraderie was electric. At one point, the HOA president, an affable retiree, took the stage to give a short speech. He praised everyone who pitched in, from the folks who hammered nails to those who cooked hot meals for volunteers. Then he acknowledged me with a grin. Lucas Chapman might be a TV star, but around here he's also the neighbor who helped us survive a real crisis. Applause filled the air. I felt my face warm. The neighbors presented me with a small carved wooden plaque reading, "Thank you for guiding the pines at Stormhawk Ridge 20XX. Touched beyond words, I accepted it, promising to cherish this place forever. In the background, Martin discreetly filmed, capturing the final scenes for that special broadcast about the sabotage and recovery. As evening settled, the festival gave way to dancing under strings of fairy lights. Laughter echoed among the tall pines. The road, once a symbol of isolation, was now the heart of celebration. I recalled how, months ago, I'd moved here seeking solitude. Fate had different plans. I found a community worth fighting for. In the following weeks, Martin and the show's editors wrapped up the special episode about the pines. Titled Sabotage on Stormhawk Ridge, A Community's Triumph, it featured my behind-the-scenes perspective, interviews with neighbors, and footage of Karen's meltdown and arrest. While not a typical wilderness story, the network believed it illustrated the resilience that Wilderness Redeemer championed. When it aired, it garnered huge viewership. Audiences were captivated by the real-life drama of a single road controlling an entire mountain community, and how quickly it turned to crisis when sabotage struck. Karen's on-camera rants, plus the final shot of her handcuffed by the sheriff, drove home the lesson that no one stands above the law or the good of the community. In the Pines, we gathered at the lodge to watch the broadcast together. Cheers erupted as the segment concluded with images of the Renewal Festival, set to an uplifting music track. People patted my shoulders, some with tears in their eyes, remembering the darkest days now transformed into a proud memory. I felt immeasurable gratitude to have played a part, not just as a TV star, but as a neighbor. Surprisingly, the show triggered an outpouring of support from across the country. Viewers sent messages praising the Pines for their unity. Companies offered donations to further improve the area or sponsor local community projects. The county, seeing the positive press, announced new emergency protocols for mountain communities, ensuring no fiasco like Karen's sabotage would catch them off guard again. While a handful of sensational tabloids labeled Karen the ultimate HOA villain, most coverage centered on the heroism and cooperation. A TV talk show invited Ms. Bernice and me to speak about grassroots solidarity in remote areas. Bernice was hesitant. Public speaking wasn't her forte, but eventually she agreed, wanting to spread a message of hope. Thus, out of the crisis, the Pines found not only internal strength, but also national goodwill. Even the local economy benefited slightly, as curious tourists visited the region, ironically wanting to see the infamous pass. We welcomed them kindly, turning a dreadful memory into a lesson in resilience. Sometimes, Ms. Bernice mused, the worst storm leaves behind the clearest skies. Despite the feel-good aftermath, I sometimes reflected on Karen's downfall with a mix of relief and sadness. What drove her to such extremes? Did she crave power, or was she consumed by paranoia about her property? We'd likely never fully understand. The damage was done. She faced her sentence, presumably behind bars, far from the mountains she once tried to rule. In the months that followed, the Pines thrived. The community revived old traditions, like a summer solstice bonfire and a winter carnival. Freed from Karen's overshadowing demands, the HOA functioned smoothly. No more petty fines over mailbox color or yard decor. Instead, members tackled real issues, ensuring the road's maintenance, caring for elderly residents, organizing volunteer firefighting training, an idea I championed given the region's susceptibility to wildfires. My own life settled into a rhythm I adored, filming seasonal episodes of Wilderness Redeemer in short bursts, then returning to Stormhawk Ridge to rest and spend time with neighbors. Sometimes I guided youth groups on nature hikes, teaching them bushcraft. Other times, I gave private lessons on first aid or emergency preparedness. The fiasco with Karen had taught us the value of readiness, be it for a storm, an avalanche, or a sabotage attempt. Occasionally, I still use my satellite communicator, but mostly to chat with the production team or confirm schedule changes. The device, once used to call for rescue, now served as a symbol of how we overcame adversity through collaboration. Neighbors teased me good-naturedly. Are you going to call for a chopper if we run out of coffee next time? Laughter always followed, reflecting how we'd turned crisis into comedic memory. At sunrise, I'd often stand on my porch, gazing over Stormhawk Pass. The new guardrails gleamed in the early light, the road secure and welcoming. Gone were the days of dread, when crossing that pass felt life-threatening. Instead, it was a testament to perseverance. If one misguided individual couldn't break our spirit, nature's challenges wouldn't stand a chance either. About a year after the sabotage, the final chapter of Karen's saga played out in court. At a sentencing review hearing, she attempted to reduce her penalty, claiming remorse and mental stress. The judge, having seen the original footage of her meltdown, remained unconvinced. She'd pleaded guilty to felony vandalism and reckless endangerment, so a harsh consequence was inevitable. The court denied her request. While I felt no glee at someone's downfall, it seemed just as she remained held accountable. The day the news broke, the community let out a collective sigh. A final line was drawn under the crisis, ensuring no immediate threat of her return. That evening, we held an impromptu bonfire near the lodge, where neighbors toasted marshmallows and told comedic anecdotes about the Karen days. Laughter replaced the old tension. The only sign that fiasco ever happened was the memory of boulders tumbling and rotted rebar, now replaced with bright steel supports. With closure reached, the story of Stormhawk Ridge lived on as local legend. Guests occasionally asked, "Is that the place where the crazy HOA lady tore up the road?" We answered with a grin, "Yes, but we overcame it." People found it both cautionary and inspiring, reminding us how a single person's sabotage can threaten an entire community, but also how unity can overcome even the most disruptive acts. In quiet moments, I considered how life might have been if I never used the emergency beacon, or if the community hadn't rallied. The scenario was chilling. Weeks of isolation, possible tragedies for the sick or vulnerable. But we'd faced that cliff of worst-case outcomes and, through collective resolve, stepped back from the edge. We'd shown the world that ordinary people can accomplish extraordinary feats when they stand together. Late autumn in the pines arrived with crisp mornings and golden leaves drifting across Stormhawk Pass. One chilly dawn, I hiked to a vantage point overlooking the entire valley, sipping hot coffee from a thermos. The repaired road snaked gracefully below, a living artery connecting us to the outside world, safe, secure, and owned by no single tyrant. Up here, I felt the majesty of the mountains, the hush of the forest, and the warmth of a community that had turned adversity into victory. The sabotage that once threatened to sever us from civilization had ended up strengthening our bonds. We had learned that resilience is not just an individual trait, but a shared one. From the teen who hammered tent stakes to the elder who cooked for volunteers, each played a role in reclaiming our home. Returning down the trail, I passed neighbor after neighbor who greeted me with a wave or a smile, no longer overshadowed by fear or suspicion. Even the children laughed freely, riding bikes along Stormhawk Pass with no gate or debris to stop them. For them, the crisis was a story they'd recall in adulthood, about the time a woman tried to claim the road, but the entire neighborhood rose in defiance. Eventually, I strolled back to my cabin, feeling at peace. I set down my thermos, picked up the small wooden plaque the HOA had gifted me, and ran my fingers over its engraved letters. For guiding the pines at Stormhawk Ridge. A lump formed in my throat. I'd traveled the globe, teaching survival, but here, on this mountain, I'd found the truest example of it. Survival through solidarity, empathy, and determination. Over the next months and years, life in the pines continued in quiet contentment, with new neighbors joining and old traditions solidifying. If people asked about the sabotage, we'd share the cautionary tale about how one woman's arrogance nearly locked us away from the world, and how a survival TV star's rescue overshadowed her scheme. But we always ended with the real moral: a community that stands as one can overcome even the steepest obstacles.